I've seen China ban Bitcoin, every morning. Make that transition and say Bitcoin is actually backed by energy, not what you know, what they want you to think. Meta, in this case, knows a ton of things about me. My fear is that these things can be weaponized in ways that I don't even understand.
Awesome. Today, we're talking about a very interesting subject, and it's around ethics and misconceptions of crypto. And as I shared in the first episode of the crypto series, I said that I stayed away from crypto for as long as possible. I did not see the use of crypto being applicable to me because it did not seem to me that crypto was really backed by anything, and crypto trading seemed like gambling to me. Now, I don't think I was necessarily wrong. I just didn't know as much before. But for this episode, I want to dive deeper into the topic to address some of the confusion that's in the air that surrounds crypto. Shukri, what would you say some of the most common misconceptions are around crypto?
So the biggest misconception that you alluded to is that the crypto is not backed by anything, and that could be true in the case of certain currencies. But let's look at Bitcoin for a second. So the U.S. dollar is not backed by anything, right? Historically, the U.S. dollar was backed by gold, and then eventually, around the Nixon time, essentially we decoupled the U.S. dollar printing from backing it by any asset. So in that case, I would argue with you that, hey, the US dollar is not backed by anything. Versus when you look at Bitcoin and you try to understand it, Bitcoin is backed by miners who are actually expending CPU cycles and energy to secure that chain. So you could make that transition and say Bitcoin is actually backed by energy. Like there's a certain amount of kilowatt energy that goes into securing Bitcoin and issuing a Bitcoin. So practically it's backed by energy. Now, and then you go into, for example, Ethereum. Ethereum, especially Ethereum at previous point, it was actually proof of work. So it's, and to simplify this, proof of work is the same algorithm that Bitcoin follows, is that for a miner to get compensated, they have to do work and prove that they've actually done the work to secure the network, and based on that, they're rewarded with Bitcoin. Ethereum for the longest time was like that, and now Ethereum moved from proof of work to proof of stake. And what proof of stake is, there's a backing, right? So when a miner today secures the Ethereum network, they kind of put aside money and they say, hey, listen, I'm going to be securing this network. And if we catch him cheating, what we're going to do is we're going to take that money he put on the line. And that's kind of the concept of staking, is for me to set money aside and say, hey, I promise to do the things I'm going to do. And if I don't do them, I'm going to get penalized. And if I do them, I get incentivized. So in that sense, these currencies have backing. Now, you can turn your attention to meme coins, aka shit coins, and you can ask the question, okay, so what are these backed by? Right? There's nothing to back them up. And in some sense, you might be right. But I think having enough people believe in a currency is enough backing. And I would argue with you that if people wake up tomorrow morning and they say, hey, we stop believing in the US dollar and we're not gonna transact it with the US dollar is done. And forget the US dollar, take any third world country who's struggling today with inflation, that is struggling today with the currency being devalued like crazy. It's one of these examples, is that people stop believing in the currency of that country. And what's interesting is that if you look at those countries, many people are now flooding to crypto, specifically Bitcoin, as a means to hedge against that inflation and as a means to hedge against bad governments. And again, I think that means that there is some backing to these currencies. And don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of shitcoins that are out there that are really, pure pump and dump scams. There is nothing to backing them up. And we're being manipulated into buying some of these things. And this is where, you understanding crypto and spending time to research projects before you get involved with them becomes really, really important.
And when
So
it comes to the research, what kind of items do you want to typically look at? I know you mentioned white papers before. Mind just elaborating how you want to conduct the research? What are some metrics to look at?
so for I can talk about someone who's non-technical, and then we'll go into someone who's technical. So if you're not technical or you're not super duper immersed into the blockchain, it's going to be very hard for you to vet and to invest. So in that case, you might have to rely on other people vetting this currency for you, right? And there's a few reputable uh, influencers, YouTube channels that kind of put in really solid research on the blockchain. And so if you're not technical enough, your best bet is to follow those people and follow these communities. But there's a ton of charlatans too. So if you've spent enough time in crypto, you'll be exposed to both of these. And a good proxy for me is people or projects that withstood the test of time, that withstood the test of a few bear markets. So I would more likely trust Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and these projects that have been through 2, 3 bull runs and bear markets, and they're still here. So that's a good bias to say, yeah, these are most likely things that are here to stay, and the longer they stay, the longer they're likely to stay. Versus some of the short-term fads, like the last bull run, it was the metaverse, right? And there's few legit metaverse projects, but I've personally invested in a few metaverse projects that today are worthless. And it's very hard to say, even if we go back to the previous bull cycle in FTX, right? Sam Bankman-Fried, like everybody followed him, everybody believed he's the greatest thing since Vitalik, and see where we are today. So sometimes, and I think it's worth to think about it this way. Every technology, every new technology that the world sees, it has, you can apply it for good, you can apply it for bad. If you take the internet and you say, hey, the internet is just bad because of all the porn, all the all the social networks, or the way it hijacked our attention. True. But you can also look at, you know the internet allowed everyone around the world to be connected, to share ideas, to exchange things. And so you can't, I don't like to kind of make a bucket of, yeah, it's either good or bad. It's a bit of both. And that's with every technology that we've created that is worth it. It always has that double-edged sword.
Got it.
So
And would you say that, or sorry, go ahead.
so we talked about, not backed by anything. The second concern is, hey, Bitcoin and all the crypto is used for illegal activities. And and you're right, you're not wrong. But so is the US dollar. So US dollar is used for illegal activities too. It just happens to be, it's the way we transact. It has nothing to do with it being the cryptocurrency for us to saying, yeah, cryptocurrency is illegal activity. It's not. There's a distinction there. It's a means to transact. And so you could use gold for illegal activities. You can use US dollar for illegal activities, and therefore you can also use Bitcoin for illegal activities. And then the final one is about speculation. The stock market also has room for speculation and market manipulation. So the typical stock market goes through similar cycles, and you have, people, you have big players, you have whales dumping on others. So that happens in crypto, but it also happens in the traditional financial market. So the idea that crypto is just for speculation, to me, is like, no, that's not true. There is innovation that is happening. It will enable certain things, but it's helpful to remind ourselves it's still early days.
And for those that don't know, mind just elaborating a little bit on what speculation is.
Speculation is when you kind of buy a currency or buy an asset, just speculating that the price is going to go up. So this is where I'm like, oh yeah, this coin, like, you have to get into this coin because I'm pretty damn sure this coin is going to go up. And to me, if I cannot explain to you clearly why this is going to go up, and what's the thesis, and what's the narrative, or what's going to be fueling that rise of that currency. So we take an example, Ethereum. I can tell you that Ethereum is going to go up. Now, what is it? And it's not based on me, organizing a group on Telegram and kind of pumping Ethereum. It's very hard to pump, especially because of the market value. But it's more because we know that Ethereum, ETH is essentially the currency of the Ethereum network. And the more adoption, the more projects come online on the Ethereum network, as that usage goes up, the demand for ETH is going to go up, and therefore the value of ETH is likely to go up. If you are able to kind of come up with hypotheses like this, now it's not just speculation, right? And so going back to how do I research a project? What's my criteria for crypto project? The first thing I'm going to be looking at is social proof, and this is the easiest one to look at, and it's harder to fake. You can still fake a certain amount of social proof. So if I go and let's say I'm looking at a crypto project for the first time, I just heard of this new currency. The first thing I would do is go check their socials, and I'm looking for how many followers do they have, but that's not enough because you can always buy fake followers. The second thing I want to look at is engagement, right? So if I'll go on Twitter, look up that currency, see how many followers they have, see how much engagement there is. Then if they have a Discord or Telegram, I'm actually jumping into that Discord and Telegram and checking community engagement. What type of conversations are being had in the community? Is it all, hey, to the moon? Then I'll be more, cautious about that project. But if there's like intelligent conversations happening around what is this project about, how do we adopt it, how do we increase adoption to it, how do we build on top of it, these are usually good signs that that project or that currency is doing something worthy. The next step now, if I kind of pass those initial, and these are simple filters, right? I would do this before I dive into a white paper to really kind of understand how things work. Now, I've also seen a fair share of white papers that are 100, 200 pages long, but you go through the 200 pages and they're complex, they're dense, and they said nothing useful. And to me, if I don't understand it, I'm not going to invest in it. It's as simple as that. I think if you look at the Ethereum white paper, and you look at like the Worthy project white papers, they're dense. Yes, they might be a bit complex, but you can distill them down and you're able to understand them and you are able to see the use cases. And so I want to see clarity in a white paper. If I can't wrap my head around it, I'm not going to invest in it. Whether it's good or bad, I think that's a good criteria for anyone who's an investor. Warren Buffett talks about this, and Warren Buffett hates crypto, by the way. But with that, Warren Buffett talks about kind of his circle of competence. It's the things they understand. And I think we tend to lose money when we invest the money in something that we don't understand. And if we do that, you have you're essentially blind, right? So let's say, Anatolia, I come to you and say, hey, you should buy this currency. And let's say, because you don't know enough, you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to go in it. But let's say 2 weeks from now, the currency is going down like crazy. If you don't know what is happening, why is it going down, your natural instinct is to go and say, hey, you're going to freak out and sell, right? Even though it could be that the community is going through a problem or there was an issue. If someone understands what's happening and believes in the long-term vision of a project, then they're more likely to hold through the better and the worse. A good example is, China for the last 10 years, they've always kind of came in the news and said, oh, China is banning Bitcoin, right? And if this is your first exposure to Bitcoin, your natural reaction is to freak out and say, okay, the world is falling apart, and I might as well just like sell. Versus I've been in crypto for so many years, I've seen China ban Bitcoin, every morning. I'm like, meaningless. Like, I really believe in the potential. Whether China banned it today or 5 years from now, it's irrelevant. It's going to go up. There is going to be adoption. People are going to use it. I can see the use cases. I'm going to hold through all of this madness. And actually, that's how I win, right? What in the essence of investing, in my opinion, is for you to have a personal thesis, and you're either right and you're going to win big and you have to be ready for that, but you could also be dead wrong, and you're going to lose money, and you have to be prepared for that. So where people get in trouble is, I would never take, my entire life savings and my dad's saving and plow it into one currency, right? So this is where kind of risk tolerance comes in. But this is also, you kind of, in the back of your mind, you have to always think, this could go to zero. And there are legit projects, legit use cases backed by insane investors that just fail. And that's the nature of technology. That's the nature of innovation. You're going to have, the beauty of crypto is that the good, the bad, the scams, and the most innovative things are there. And they get to play in that space. And what happens over time is bad ideas die, scams die, but then out of the ashes will emerge better projects, better technology. And then we're going to have things that will emerge today, and they're going to be here for the next 20 years, for the next 100 years.
There's a few points in there that you made, and I want to go back to them, starting with the thesis. You said make a personal thesis on investment. What is that personal thesis comprised of? Is it just a few crypto plays that one believes in, or is it more to that?
There is more to that. And I think it's, if I reflect on what is true today that's going to be true in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, you bet on people's psychology. That's one. You bet on like people's behavior, right? There are certain things that are true today as they're going to be true in 10 years. Cheaper, we all want cheaper payments. We all want cheaper transfers of money. And so any project to me that kind of plays on this long-term trend, or these are things that are like we hold true, and they're going to continue to be true. And so if my bet or my thesis is aligned with these things that I believe are going to be true in the next 5, 10, 15 years, then this is a good bet, in my opinion. So that's kind of one thesis, but there could be others. It's very hard for me to kind of talk about that, because with every type of blockchain project, or with every type of crypto, usually I have to have a certain level of conviction that certain things are going to be true and they're going to lead to adoption. To take another example, AI. We know that AI is going to be here for the long term. So that's a trend, right? So this is, if technology, and if you kind of distill that bet down, we know that we just need more powerful computing over time. And the more powerful computing becomes, people are going to want that. There is no scenario in the world where, oh yeah, you have this amazing, powerful computing model that got invented, and oh, nobody wants to use it. That makes no sense, right? I can't see a world where people don't leverage AI. So then you're like, okay, so then crypto AI, therefore, is likely to stay. Now, which project? This is where now you might make different bets. So if we look at crypto AI, for example, there are projects that are more focused on applying AI for blockchain security. Wonderful. And that's a great thesis. And so now you're like, okay, we do need blockchain security, but you can find 5 projects that are tackling security in different ways, right? One of them might be, oh, we're all about smart contract security. Great. Another one might be, we're focused on monitoring, for example, the blockchain for sentiment. And so now you can look at these 2 projects and you say, which one is right? Not sure. It could be both, right? Like we know that there is market manipulation, so anything that's kind of focused on sentiment might be useful. And we know that in general AI is going to grow big, and so therefore there's going to be adoption. So the thesis to me is a personal thing. I can't just say, hey, here is a bunch of theses, believe in them. This is where it has to align with the way you see the world. And for me, the way I see the world is that digital currencies are just happening, whether we like them or not. Every currency is going to go digital at some point. So then that's a thesis that in general, blockchain is a worthy investment. Then we go into, we need a solid network that will carry the money around. And now we go into two theses, right? So I might say, listen, I think Ethereum is going to be that global internet of money. You might come in and you might say, no, I don't think it's Ethereum. Ethereum is shit. The gas fees are ridiculous, and I'm willing to bet on Solana. So this is where kind of personal preference will also come in. Now, you would make that preference based on certain things, based on certain characteristics, right? So you could argue with me that Solana is just much faster because of the design of the network, and therefore you think Solana is going to win. And I might say something like, sure, it's faster now, but Ethereum is going to have the layer twos that are going to speed things up. And I believe that's the bet. So you and I can have the same base thesis that we need a network of money, but you're going to make a bet based on, oh, I believe Solana is the right network because it's just faster out of the box. And I might make another kind of educated guess and say, no, I think it's going to be Ethereum because Ethereum has that solid, stable foundation. True, it's slow, true, it's expensive, but then the layer twos might basically unlock that next phase of growth.
Got it. Got it. And you described a few different personal theses there and how both of them might be correct, right? And with it, going back to one of your other points, people being in the community discussing crypto, something else that I've had in my head is that isn't the entire point of crypto, you have a coin, whether it be one of the main coins or the shit coins, um, or some sort of a project that you participate in. Isn't the entire point to be very good at timing on the exit? Because sooner or later, it seems that every coin ends with some sort of a rug pull or some sort of a pump and dump. Or is that a misconception?
I think every project goes through a cycle of pump and dump, whether it's a good coin, shit coin, a rug pull. Every project goes through these cycles. Now, you can make the same argument about companies, right? Like if I know where Tesla's going to peak, I'm going to go buy Tesla ideally at the bottom and wait just before, like Tesla is on the verge of breaking down and sell it. But I have not come across anyone who's really that good at timing the market. I don't think you should try to time the market. You should look at the trend. You should look at the trend, and you should look at the trend over a long period of time. This is where it's tricky, because if you look at the project that's, say, 6 months old, who knows if it's going to be here 10 years from now or 5 years from now. But you can tell, right? You can tell by the founder or the founding team's vision. And then you can tell by the founding team's, whatever. One of the things that I will pull into research is like, who are the founders and how did they arrive at this, right? If I see a founder who was working in hardware and all of a sudden I find him kind of doing fintech stuff, I'll be curious to kind of why is he doing this, right? Why is he the right person to do this? The funny thing is, this is something we vet when we vet early stage startup founders, right? Like, and you're kind of using the same criteria that we talked about in what makes a good startup founder and why he's the right fit and why this project has to exist right now. So I'm looking at the same things that I used to vet technology and startups. You can take those criteria and apply them nicely into the blockchain, because guess what? It's just another technology, and technology goes through that adoption cycle. So I'm looking at, is this a parachute, what I call a parachute founder? Is it a founder who knows nothing about crypto and just jumping in for the first time? And if that's the case, most likely, they don't know what they're talking about. They're in it for the quick buck, and it's really bad news, right? Versus someone, if I look at, for example, Vitalik's resume, right? And Vitalik didn't start Ethereum until he spent a few years kind of studying Bitcoin at the time, and he almost got obsessed with Bitcoin, and that kind of led him over time to kind of refine his ideas, refine what the blockchain is, and kind of come up with the Ethereum vision.
Got it. So out of those points, why is that person the right person? Do they have experience? What's the resume? Why now? What else?
So if I looked at the founding team and they're good, if I looked at the idea itself and it's good, the third thing I want to vet for is marketing, because you can build the best technology and the best crypto project and the best token in the world. If nobody knows about it, you're dead. And so what we want is, we want signs of adoption, signs of an excited community. And I'm going to say that this is especially for like an early stage project, it's difficult to gauge that, right? Because if a project is starting today, or maybe you look at a project where it's been alive for just a month, they're not going to have as many followers. They're not going to have as many adopters. So then what do you look at in that case? And in my case, I would say I would look for a fraction of the users or a subset or tiny number of users, but who are like rabid fans. This is a good, to me, that's a good proxy. If I find people who are like insanely bullish on the project, and I might actually pull them and ask them some questions. Hey, why are you excited about this project? What makes you insanely interested in it? And understand the reasoning. I would do that. Like if I'm vetting a project and I want to allocate serious money behind it, I might engage in conversations with the community of that project to say, what do you guys find most exciting? Like, why are you here? Are you here for a quick buck? Oh, okay. So you want to also look at the kind of people that project is attracting. And when this is kind of what takes us to, what's the marketing behind it? Is it all memes and, hey, to the moon? Then I would treat that differently than a project that is essentially saying, hey, we need this and the world needs this. And here's why we need this thing. And here's the problem it solves. And the more clarity the founding team has on this, and the more clarity they're able to give the community on this, usually the better the outcomes.
Shifting gears a little bit to anonymity. Is Bitcoin truly anonymous?
If you understand the underlying technology, you'll always find ways that I can tie your identity somehow to something. Now, the blockchain, I would say, is not anonymous because every transaction that happens on the blockchain is public. So everybody can look up everything. There's only one piece that you and I will go into to argue whether you're anonymous or not. It's your wallet. It's the wallet address. Like, can I tie a wallet address to a person or an entity? And I would say that the way the world is structured today, it's not truly anonymous. Because today the only way for you to buy crypto, or especially if you're kind of buying crypto with like large sums of money, if you're spending, let's say you're buying crypto for like $10,000, $20,000, $100,000, the only way to do that is to go through a centralized exchange, which is essentially Kraken, Binance. And the moment you go through a centralized exchange, you're forced to do KYC, which is know your customer. Essentially, they're going to ask you, hey, who you are, give us a copy of your ID, scan your face. And so therefore, you're not anonymous. And so the moment you kind of go through a centralized exchange, nothing is anonymous. There are, we know there's like peer-to-peer communities, so I can go find somebody and give him some cash and have him transfer to me Bitcoin. But where did that Bitcoin come from? Now, it doesn't mean there are no anonymity solutions. There are specific projects, not Bitcoin, not Ethereum. There are very specific projects that are targeting kind of the anonymous use case. But my thesis is that these will be kind of fought hard by regulators and they will all be shut down or they will all be compromised. Now, keep in mind, even if this is not the case, right? Even if, let's say, all the exchanges stop doing KYC tomorrow morning, there are still, because of the internet protocols, like many of the underlying protocols of the internet, because think of it, crypto is not just built from scratch. It's built on like TCP IP protocols. It might be, some of the things might be built around DNS, and now we're going down the rabbit hole. There is a lot of other building blocks that crypto is built on. And those building blocks, they're not necessarily anonymous. So to give you an example, if I want to go to a website, anyway, let's say I want to go to a website that would allow me to buy Bitcoin. The moment I go to a website, I'm revealing my IP address to that website. And so maybe the blockchain transaction itself is anonymous, but I still went to that website, and somebody can, like your internet service provider, your ISP, can say, Anatoly visited this page at this date and time. So there's always ways to correlate things together, and that will give me confidence whether it's actually, Anatoly is behind that wallet. Now, there are some really interesting, especially like if we go now kind of dark web and we go into, the underbelly of the internet, there are certain technologies that will anonymize or mask certain things. For example, in the Bitcoin case, there's something called the Bitcoin tumbler. Do you know what it is?
No, no, do share.
Okay. So let's say I'm going to launder a ridiculous amount of money.
Love
A,
it.
a dumb way
Excited.
to do it, a dumb way to launder a lot of money is I have money, I have a bunch of crypto sitting in my wallet, and I'm just going to take all of, let's say I have $10 million worth of crypto. The dumb way to do it is essentially I take the $10 million, put it in one transaction, send it to you. Boom. If somebody puts two and two together, we're both in trouble. A tumbler is essentially, you can think of it as a big money laundering machine. What I would do is I would send my $10 million to this Tumblr or to kind of this website. Let's go to website for ease of explanation. So I send my $10 million. What the Tumblr does is I would give it 20 addresses on the other side. So the Tumblr will kind of take my money in, but then will split it not equally. It'll almost split it randomly and wire money now to 20 addresses. And maybe actually it doesn't wire them directly to the 20 addresses. It'll indirectly send them to another set of 40 addresses, and then so essentially it kind of mixes the transaction. And the cool thing is that the Tumblr is taking my transactions, is taking your transactions, is taking hundreds of people's transactions on one end, splitting
Mhm.
them or passing them through multiple addresses before sending it to its final destination or destinations. And this becomes a mess that is much harder to detangle. Now, I think a rule of life is whenever you have someone doing something, there's someone who's trying to hack that or change that, right? So there are certain solutions out there that can do some probabilistic modeling to guess which transactions are going where. And so it's always a constant battle between, you want to call it good and evil, or you want to call it between the centralization and the decentralization, the anonymity and the de-anonymization. So there's always that constant battle, and I don't think anyone wins. I think it's kind of an ever evolving battle where we always up the stake, up the stake, up the stake. So there are tools that exist today for anonymity or near anonymity, and there are tools whose purpose is kind of to essentially de-anonymize whoever is doing things. And so, yeah.
And what you described right there, companies do something very similar to kind of create a confusion around the paper trail through offshores and basically pushing that money through four different companies and splitting it in nine different ways.
And shell
To
companies and companies that exist in jurisdictions that you kind of have no visibility into shareholders. And to me, you can see that this happens. This is how big companies launder money. I'll use that word carefully. This is how big
Mhm.
companies essentially evade taxes or run crazy schemes, and certain companies do get caught, and then you kind of it. But it all this is kind of one of my rules for security is that you are as weak as your weakest link. So all it takes is one mistake from one company or one mistake from one party, and now you can take the whole network down. And the same thing goes with anonymity, right? All it takes is to reveal one part of this transaction and to tie one address to one person, and then you can basically use that to bring the whole network down.
What are some of the other biggest risks when it comes to crypto?
At this point, I would say the regulatory risk, right, and the kind of governments meddling in crypto in different ways. You could kind of also start to argue that maybe volatility is a risk, but I think it's really the two biggest risks, one coming from governments and regulation. And I don't want to make it, I'm not trying to make governments look or sound bad. I think some regulation is healthy. Over regulation kills innovation. So what we want is a healthy balance between regulation and like freedom to be able to explore certain ideas without fear of ramifications or legal ramifications, without fear of going to jail. But then also there's this kind of fine line, right? Like, because a lot of innocent people lose money, and that's obviously something that is really bad, right? So what we want is a healthy balance between regulation and innovation. The other biggest risk to crypto in general is the kind of cyber security or the security risk, right? We know that we're working now on quantum computing, and part of the things that quantum computers are able to do is essentially unlock or break the encryption that we have today. That all blockchains use a certain type of encryption, and we know that quantum computing is eventually going to be able to break that encryption in seconds. So now all the secure, but then if that happens, then all hell is going to break loose, because this is the same encryption used by our financial organizations, by banks, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we will kind of evolve to get there, but obviously the cyber or the security risk is going to be the second biggest risk other than regulation.
And what are some of the biggest historical crashes or scams that have happened in the crypto world?
Okay, so I think the oldest one is probably the MT exchange that got hacked for, I can't remember how many $1 million. And Quadriga, which I personally lost quite a bit of money on. This is one that's been, in the news. There's even been a Netflix documentary on the Quadriga kind of case, where the allegedly the founder died, and he had the only keys to all the crypto that the exchange had. So these are kind of some of the big ones. The DAO hack, this is like very early in the Ethereum days, that led to the DAO fork. That was kind of also one of the big ones. And then you take the previous bull run FTX going down, that nobody believed FTX is going to go down. They had a freaking arena named after them. Right? They had all these funds. Sam Bankman-Fried was the god of crypto, and then all of a sudden, overnight, poof, no more. Or Terra, Luna, right? That's another one, and that's another one I lost quite a bit of money on, because I was like, hey, this is stable coins. It's freaking great. And then poof, went bust overnight, and with it, investors' money. With it, there was a big fund. 3AC had a lot of money invested into Terra Luna, and so Terra Luna went bust, and with it, 3AC is gone. Poof, no more. I really like the 3AC founders; they were really smart guys, but shit happens.
And how should the crypto community address the problem of pump and dump schemes?
It's really hard. It's really hard to kind of counter the pump and dump schemes, because
Some
how
of them
can
are
you
inherently
prevent?
designed for that.
And I think it's a problem, but it's also a benefit in some ways, because I think here's how I would think about it. One thing you learn in marketing is that people, you never market something by talking about the massive amount of work you have to do to kind of, like, if I have a product that's a great product and I believe fundamentally it's going to bring you the best results, but you're going to have to do a ton of hard work to get the results from that product or service, and we market it as, hey, our product works, but you're going to have to do a shit ton of work. Nobody would want this product. So what do you do when you're marketing this thing? You want to make it sound easy. You want to kind of highlight, you want to highlight the cherry on top. You never explain the cake, you just explain the cherry on top, and then people want the cherry on top. So I think in some sense, the 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 pump and dumps and the media headlines, in some sense, they actually help with the crypto marketing. Now, how would we prevent the pump and dumps? Twitter is trying to counter bots today, right? So we know that Twitter has had a massive bot problem, like a ton of people running bots on Twitter. It's a shit show there. And Musk recently announced that everyone who wants to create a new account and post has to pay a penny to post, or pay $1 to post. And so I think something like this could happen in crypto to prevent the pumps and dumps. So maybe you stick some money on the side to buy something, and now if you dump it, then maybe we take that money that you're staking. And again, I'm not saying this is the best solution, but I think there will be over time ways to counter the pumps and dumps. But then now you're also veering into, are we trying to play the role of regulators, and are we going to be killing certain amount of innovation by trying to kind of counter the pump and dumps?
You brought up a really interesting point around paying for social media, and I honestly think that we live at a time of great opportunity where we're not necessarily being charged to post and engage our audience. And I think with time, that's going to change. I think eventually we'll have to pay in order to engage a certain portion of our audience, because that's just one extra way for these platforms to monetize us.
But I think you
Do you
always
see
paid.
it playing out the same way?
But I think you always paid. You just paid with your attention, right? You paid when you saw the ads. Like I think social media has always been paid, but you either paid with your attention or the social media companies. You paid by them monetizing your data. And now I would give props to Musk because he's just essentially what he's doing is just changing that model to say, listen, you can pay by us mining your data and selling it to a shit ton of parties, or you can actually pay cash. And now you get to decide, do I want to pay with my attention? Do I want to pay with my private and anonymous data being sold? Or I want to pay with good old hard cash? And I'm the kind of person that I'd rather pay with cash than have my data sold and monetized without my knowledge, without my consent. And, and now I don't know who the heck has my data. No, I'd rather pay cash to post. I'd rather pay cash to use a product than to pay in sneaky ways. I think more
But
transparency.
why is it just one or the other? Why isn't it both at the same time? Does it have to do with some sort of internal Twitter changes where they're no longer choosing to?
I think they're still mining data for their own internal usage for sure, especially for AI. It's a gold mine. And I think that's actually probably the main reason Musk bought Twitter, for the data. Because now he's training a whole bunch of machine learning algorithms on that data. Why is it one way? Or I don't think it's one way or the other. I think they both coexist, right? And maybe you get to have a choice. Do you want to see more ads or do you want to pay? And now it's a personal freedom matter where I choose, okay, I have the money, I'd rather pay. I don't have the money, it's okay, I'll watch a few ads. But I think what I would like to see changed is more transparency. Like if I'm actually going to be clicking on an ad, and if you're actually building a persona profile on me, I want to know, what do you know about me, right? I think Facebook knows a massive amount of things about each one of us, and they've correlated. It's scary because they not only they're mining what I'm doing within Facebook, they're mining what else I'm doing on the internet, and they're correlating all of this together. And now with WhatsApp, they're eavesdropping on every conversation. So you have like them correlating data from WhatsApp and from Instagram and from all the sources that they have, but also from public searches, from search results, from other organizations. What scares me is, for all we know, Meta could be colluding with other organizations, with Google, let's say. Again, not saying this is the case, but now Google is pulling all my search history, and now and then they're correlating it with who I'm talking to and who I'm interacting with on a day-to-day basis on Instagram or on WhatsApp, and now they know about me much more than I know about myself. And I don't mind you knowing about me a lot of things, but I want to know what you know about me.
Why is that so important? Is it the feeling of control? Why fear something like this? Because I thought about this the other day, and it's not that I don't mind it. It's just that they have such high control and they have so much data on me, and there's just so much tech. I feel like the moment a person starts using one of these, you just voluntarily have given up control over what they know versus don't know about you. And it gets so scary to the point where you think of things, and it has nothing to do with even researching. I find that I think of things and it just starts appearing from the ether.
So
Is it even possible to get that control back? Like, why is it important for your case to not share that data?
let me try to attack this from two angles. The first
Mhm.
is, you can make the argument that, hey, listen, if you're a clean person, if everything you do is above board, you have nothing to fear. And I would agree with that. I would say if someone is doing everything that they're doing is like ethically, legally, blah, 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 they have nothing to fear. But that's not my fear. So here's what we know. We know that TikTok, for example, knows how to hijack our attention and keep it for a very, very long time, right? So, and we also know that when you go into, for example, an Instagram, you kind of end up in an echo chamber where you only see things that are relevant to you, or only see things that validate the way you see the world. And in my opinion, this is extremely dangerous, because now you don't see the counter opinions. You don't see things that validate what you know already, or not what you know, what they want you to think. This is where, right? And now, so if Facebook, let's say, or Meta in this case, knows a ton of things about me, my fear is that these things can be weaponized in ways that I don't even understand. And this is where AI comes in, and this is where it becomes extremely dangerous. Now, imagine that, end of world scenario. Now, all of this data that Facebook has, a malicious AI has. It can essentially control me. It can control my world. It's controlling every piece of media that I see. It's controlling every post that I see. If I drive a Tesla, and now if my car is connected to the network, then it also can correlate where I am, what I'm doing at any point in time. You put all of this data together, and you have enough data to get rid of me, to neutralize me, or even to get me to elect a certain candidate in the elections, right? This is where that data gets weaponized, and that's what scares me. It's not that, oh yeah, if I'm doing everything above board, then great, then I have nothing to fear. Absolutely not. I think you can do everything above board, but then the data that parties know about you can be used to harm you, or to guide you against. This is where we go against like free will. Now, do you have free will in such a scenario where everything that you see has been orchestrated around you? You're living in the matrix. I don't want to live in that matrix.
And it's funny that you bring up Teslas because I think that there have been cases before in the US with Teslas. I don't recall the exact name of politicians, or politicians' families, but essentially the Tesla would lose control. They'd lose control over their Tesla and it would like drive off a bridge into the water type of scenario, or it would like
And
basically try to kill you.
so it's not just a Tesla, right? Like there's a lot of non-self-driving cars. I don't remember. I have to find it for you. I remember there's a video where a hacker takes charge of, what was it? It's a Range Rover. I think it was a Range Rover. So a hacker can essentially take control of your Range Rover and drive you to a pit, or drive you to the ocean. Who cares? So this is where, again, this is where the more connected we become, the larger the attack surface area, the larger the attack vectors, and now they have many more angles to attack you, right? If somebody, let's say there's a malicious actor who's trying to eliminate me, right? And the more they know about me, the worse it becomes for me, because now they know who my family is, they know who my friends are, and that increases the attack vector surface area. And now I'm in much more trouble than, if you know nothing about me. This is where anonymity becomes much more important, because the less people know about you, the less the world knows about you. In some cases, it's better, right? And this is where I think, this is why kind of, Warren Buffett is a very smart guy. Like, he's a very private guy. The less he shares, the more in control he feels.
And how is something like that combated? Is it through systems like crypto? Is it through regulation? What do you think the best way is to go about preventing a control like this or takeover like this from happening?
I don't like to think that regulation is the way. I like to think that personal education is the way, because I think even regulators are biased. The government is biased, right? The government's job is to control the masses. We like to believe that governments serves us, and that's to some extent is true. But part of the government's job is to ensure that chaos does not erupt, and that means some level of control on individuals or masses or groups, and therefore this data can be useful for the governments. And we know that all the governments around the world are spending a ton of money to gather data about their citizens. And so, do I want the government to regulate it in a certain way? No, I think the best answer is really personal education. The more aware I become of how my data is being used, and who's using it, and what parties are exchanging that data, the better it is. And in general, I want to reveal only certain parts of my identity or certain parts of my activity, and I have a whole bunch of things that I would rather remain private, not because they're illegal, not because they're shady, but because essentially these are things that I care about, and not everyone has to know about them.
I want to briefly touch on something that happened in the news about a week back. And some of you might recognize this news story. But there was an incident outside of Manhattan courthouse where they were doing Trump's trial. There was a guy named Max Azzarello, a 37-year-old from Florida, who set himself on fire in an act of protest. And before the self-inflammation, Max described himself as an investigative researcher who distributed pamphlets that led to a Substack newsletter titled The Ponzi Papers. And in his manifesto, it was filled with conspiracy theories. He cited grievances against what he termed a totalitarian con by the government and elites, aiming to usher in a fascist coup. And the police reported that Max had traveled to New York earlier that week, and his actions were part of an extreme protest meant to highlight his discoveries. And Max claims that, quote unquote, we are victims of a totalitarian con, and our government, along with many of their allies, is about to hit us with an apocalyptic fascist world coup. What are your thoughts on that guy putting himself on fire? Did he achieve his goal?
I'd like to think that there are better means to achieve your goals than setting yourself on fire. So to me, I like, I don't, I'm not a big fan of of that part, obviously, because if I have a mission, if I have something to share with the world, is that like one time, one act of protest enough? Or am I better off to stay alive and try to educate as many people and create awareness and create a movement? I think so some of the and I kind of read the newsletter, and you'll be surprised because I do agree with certain things. Maybe certain things in there were taken to the extreme, but I do agree with certain things about what he talked about. But I wouldn't have chosen to set myself on fire to make that statement. I think there's probably other effective means to make similar statements and still stay alive and still carry on the mission. So it's unfortunate what happened to him, and sympathies go to his family. Now, I remember like in one of his claims is that, hey, the government is all along behind crypto. And I would say there's some truth to that. Here's something surprising. Maybe we'll go into this one. So Bitcoin, one of the things that are really interesting to point out in the Bitcoin white paper is the encryption algorithm used by Bitcoin. So in one of the encryption algorithms behind Bitcoin, essentially there's like a series of encryption algorithms that are, let's call them, certified by the NSA and by the government as, yes, they're secure and they're legit and you can use them to sign transactions. And in Satoshi's paper, he did not use any of these algorithms that were certified, and he used an algorithm that was like not certified. And I think a lot of people, myself included, were scratching our heads. Why would you not use any of the algorithms that are certified truly random, certified truly like legit for encrypting the data? And when Snowden came online and started to tell us all the things that the governments know about us and the NSA and all of that, one of the findings that most of those encryption algorithms that were certified had the NSA had backdoors to them. And the only one, as far as we know, that did not have that is the one used in the white paper. So this leads me to believe that whoever invented Bitcoin, and we still don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, there's a whole bunch of theories that I looked at and even investigated myself. And I don't think we still know who Satoshi is. But he or she or they must have knowledge, must have had knowledge of kind of NSA practices and algorithms, which even might lead me to believe that whoever invented Bitcoin must have either worked for the NSA or must have had the knowledge. Now, does it mean that the whole kind of Bitcoin is an NSA operation, I would say who knows. It's very hard to say these things, but this is where some of the things that were mentioned in the paper by this is Max, right? So this is where kind of some of the stuff written in that newsletter by Max kind of strikes a chord with me. I'm like, there's some truth to that. There are certain things that were taken to extremes, but there's some truth to, and we see this. I think we see that the government is trying to kind of control the blockchain. We just covered that now, and so there is some truth to that. And then we know that over time, I mean, very simple. Anatoly, put yourself in the position of power, right? Let's pretend now you're in charge of whatever country, your favorite country. One of the things that you wanted as in charge is kind of control. Like it's part of human nature, right? It's part of every organization. There's a few organizations. I think the moment, now I'm going to go all Jordan Peterson here, but I believe that for society to exist, you always need a hierarchy. There should be a hierarchy. We've always organized ourselves into hierarchy. If you look at the animal kingdom is organized in hierarchy. And so the moment you want to build something into hierarchy, you need something to hold that hierarchy together. And that's usually power, right? So essentially, and this power and money, they go hand in hand, and this power and control, they go hand in hand. So if you are a government trying to keep your population together, part of your job is essentially to make sure that population stays in control and you don't have crazies take over the world, which is a good thing, right? Like we don't want crazies to take over the world. But then once you have that power, it's intoxicating, right? And you'll want more and more. The more power you have, the more you'd want. And where would you stop? Human nature, we know we're greedy. We're inherently greedy. So the more power I give you, the more you'll want, and the more you'll go to acquire more and more power. And this is where it becomes dangerous, because we said, like, if our data now is with Meta, and Meta has this data, and we know they're colluding with the government and sharing this data with the government, and it's very easy for me to see how how this could end in a totalitarian regime, right? But in order to avoid painting a very grim picture on this, I would say that's true, but we've always had heroes. We've always had heroes who came to the forefront and said, this is wrong, this is immoral, this is not right, we're going to change it. And I'd like to think that there's always people in charge trying to kind of take more control, and there are people who stand up to them and say, no, this is not the case, and this is how heroes are created. We're getting there. I do believe we're getting there, but I also believe that the world is highly cyclical, and for every up, there's a down. And so we will always veer to one extreme, right? Like we had the World War, and then we had a good period of peace, and now we see we're kind of, heading towards another World War territory. And I think it's just like embrace part of that cycle, and we do everything in our power to make sure things go in the right direction. And it's that balance between the two forces, between the good and evil, and between regulation and deregulation, centralization and decentralization. And it's helpful for us to always be mindful of where we are in that cycle.
What do you think is the likelihood of government being behind it?
50-50 for me at this point. I think it's 50-50. It could be that the government behind it. Now, I'm not sure if it's U.S. government, because it's also possible this could be another government. Russia, for example. Russia has a really good amount of hackers. So who knows? Who knows? But again, the other cool thing is that once someone, whether Bitcoin itself was invented by the government or not, the cat is out of the bag. The technology is now out there, and maybe Bitcoin is kind of created by government, maybe, and maybe we'll find that and it'll get revealed to us eventually. But the technology and the innovation it brought will enable good use cases, right? Let's say this is the malicious use case. We can still take the learning from that experiment and apply it to the next good use case and create better technologies and safer technologies. So to me, that kind of creation and destruction is just part of the life cycle.
We talked about some really interesting stuff today. Just to recap, anonymity of crypto, biggest crypto risks and misconceptions, control and government potentially being behind crypto, people setting themselves on fire, I think this might be the last episode we do on crypto.
Yeah.
And next, we'll be discussing biohacking, medtech, and health tech.
I can't wait to dive deeper into kind of biohacking and health tech and wellness. This is another area I'm super duper passionate about.
100%, 100%. And every time you talk about health tech, I can see you light up even harder than you do with crypto. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.